"You're the most amazing friend in the world," she declared at her family reunion gathering while I remained there speechless after 7 years pretending as her boyfriend. Those words hit me like a physical blow, standing there in front of her entire extended family who had watched us together for years. I had been living what I thought was a committed relationship with Olivia, but apparently I'd been the only one who got that memo. 7 years of my life had been built on a foundation that existed only in my imagination, and I was just now discovering the truth in the most humiliating way possible. I'm Lucas, 31 years old, and I work as an accountant for a mid-sized firm in our lakeside community. Olivia owns a small bakery downtown that I've been helping manage the finances for since she inherited it from her aunt 3 years ago. We met in college, and what started as study sessions evolved into something I believed was love. I helped her renovate the lake house she inherited, spent countless weekends setting up her booth at farmers markets, drove her to medical appointments when her anxiety flared up, and even took care of her elderly grandmother every Sunday while Olivia caught up on bakery prep work. I managed her business accounting, helped her navigate tax seasons, and was her automatic +1 to every family gathering, wedding, and holiday celebration. We shared everything except a bed, which she explained by saying she was saving herself for marriage, something I respected and even admired about her. We had our own routines, our inside jokes, our shared responsibilities, and what I thought was our future planned out together. Her family treated me like a son-in-law, her grandmother called me her honorary grandson, and her parents regularly made comments about how perfect we were together. I had been functioning as her boyfriend in every conceivable way except for the physical intimacy and the actual title, but I never questioned it because everything else felt so natural and right. The family reunion was at her cousin's place by the lake, with about 40 relatives present including aunts, uncles, and cousins who had watched our relationship develop over the years. When her cousin Rachel asked Olivia directly about our relationship status in front of everyone, expecting to hear about engagement plans or wedding dates, Olivia's response shattered my entire understanding of the last 7 years. "Oh, Lucas and I aren't dating," she said with genuine confusion, as if the question itself was absurd. "He's just the most amazing friend in the world. I honestly don't know what I'd do without him." The casual way she dismissed 7 years of what I thought was building toward marriage left me standing there unable to form words. I realized in that devastating moment that I had never actually asked her to be my girlfriend, had never gotten clear confirmation of our relationship status, and had simply assumed that our deep emotional connection and couple-like behavior meant we were committed partners building a life together. I spent the next 3 days processing what had happened at that reunion, replaying every interaction from the past 7 years and trying to understand how I'd gotten everything so wrong. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed to test something, to see if Olivia would notice when I stopped acting like her unofficial life partner and started treating her like what she claimed I was, just a friend. I decided to conduct what I privately called my boundary-setting experiment, pulling back to see her true reaction when I stopped being available for all the boyfriend duties I'd been performing without any official recognition. The results were immediate and telling. When tax season arrived and Olivia called asking if I could come over that weekend to help with her bakery's quarterly reports like I always did, I politely declined. "I'm actually busy this weekend," I told her, even though my only plans were reading a book and maybe going for a hike. "Can't you just push whatever you're doing to next weekend?" she asked, and I could hear the confusion in her voice. "The tax deadline is coming up and you know I'm terrible with numbers." I suggested she hire a professional accountant or use tax software, which prompted a long silence before she hung up without saying goodbye. Tuesday morning she called again, this time about her car making a strange noise and asking if I could take a look at it during my lunch break like I'd done countless times before. I recommended she call a mechanic or her insurance company's roadside assistance. "But you always know what's wrong with it," she protested. "Lucas, I really need your help here." When I maintained that she should get professional help for car problems, she actually raised her voice. "Why are you being like this? What's wrong with you lately?" The panic in her tone was unmistakable, not the panic of missing me as a person, but the panic of losing her unpaid support system. By Thursday, when she called asking if I could help her move inventory for the farmers market that weekend and I again declined, she completely lost it. "I don't understand what's happening," she said, and I could tell she was crying. "You're abandoning me during the busiest time of year when I need you most." The word, abandoning, struck me as particularly telling. Not that she missed my company or our time together, but that I was failing to provide services when required. Friday evening she showed up at my apartment unannounced, still wearing her flour-dusted apron from the bakery, looking frantic and exhausted. "We need to talk," she said, pushing past me into my living room. I don't know what I did wrong, but this has to stop. I'm falling behind on everything and my grandmother has been asking where you are. She sat down on my couch and looked at me like I'd personally betrayed her by not showing up to manage her life. Lucas, I'm serious. I can't handle all this stuff on my own, and you know I rely on you for help with the business side of things. I sat across from her and asked the question that had been burning in my mind since the reunion. Olivia, what exactly do you think our relationship is? She looked genuinely confused by the question. We're best friends. We've been best friends for 7 years. You're the most important person in my life. The most important person in her life, but only when I was useful to her. And what do best friends typically do for each other? I asked. They help each other out, they're there when you need them, they support each other through difficult times, she said, as if explaining something obvious to a child. I pointed out that in most friendships, both people provide support and help, that it's usually reciprocal rather than one person constantly giving while the other constantly takes. That's not fair, she said, her voice rising. I've always been there for you too. I asked her to give me specific examples of how she'd supported me or helped me through difficult times, and watched her struggle to come up with anything concrete beyond listening to me complain about work occasionally and bringing me leftover pastries from the bakery. 2 weeks later, I finally worked up the courage to have the conversation that would change everything between us. I suggested we meet at her bakery after closing time so we could talk privately without interruptions, though I had no idea how devastating the truth would actually be. I arrived at 7:30 to find Olivia cleaning the display cases, her movements sharp and agitated in a way that told me she was still upset about my recent unavailability. I'm glad you finally decided to show up, she said without looking at me, wiping down the counter with unnecessary force. I've been trying to figure out what's going on with you for weeks now. I sat down at one of the small tables and asked her directly about something that had been nagging at me since the reunion. Olivia, have you ever thought of me romantically? Even once in 7 years? She stopped cleaning and turned to face me with genuine surprise, as if I'd asked her something completely absurd. Romantically? Lucas, though. I mean, you're like family to me. You're like the older brother I never had. The older brother comment hit me like a physical blow, but I pressed on. So all those times we went to weddings together, all those family gatherings where people assumed we were a couple, you never felt anything beyond friendship? She shook her head emphatically. I thought you understood that we were just really close friends. I never meant to give you the wrong impression. I asked her about the physical affection we shared, the way she'd hold my hand during movies or lean against me during long car rides, behaviors that seemed intimate and couple-like to me. That's just how I am with people I'm comfortable with, she explained. I'm an affectionate person. I hug everyone, I hold hands with my girlfriends, I didn't think it meant anything special with you. The conversation took an even more painful turn when I discovered she had been casually dating other men throughout our entire 7-year friendship. Wait, you've been dating other people this whole time? I asked, feeling like the floor was falling out from under me. Of course I have, she said, looking at me like I was being unreasonable. Lucas, I'm 29 years old. Did you think I was just going to stay single forever? I asked her about the specific men she dated, and she mentioned several names I vaguely recognized, including someone named David who she'd apparently been engaged to for 4 months 3 years ago. You were engaged and never told me? I asked, my voice probably revealing more hurt than I intended. It didn't work out, she said dismissively. David was too controlling, always wanting to know where I was and who I was with. Plus, he got jealous of how much time I spent with you and tried to make me choose between him and our friendship. The irony of that statement wasn't lost on me. Her ex-fiancé had recognized what I had failed to see, that our dynamic was inappropriate for someone trying to build a romantic relationship with her. Olivia, how did you think this looked to other people? How did you think it looked to the men you were dating when you had me managing your business, helping with your house, spending every weekend together? She became defensive, her voice rising as she explained that she had always been honest with the men she dated about having a close male friend. I told them you were important to me and that wasn't going to change, she said. If they couldn't handle that, then they weren't the right person for me. I realized in that moment that she had been deliberately keeping our relationship ambiguous because it served her purposes, She got all the benefits of having a devoted partner without any of the commitments or limitations that come with an actual romantic relationship. So you never felt guilty about having me do boyfriend things while you were out dating other men? I asked. Boyfriend things? She repeated, genuinely confused. Lucas, you offered to help me with those things. I never forced you to do anything. I thought you enjoyed helping me because we're friends. Her ability to reframe my voluntary service as something I did for my own enjoyment rather than out of love and commitment was astounding. The final devastating blow came when she admitted something that explained so much about our dynamic. Honestly, she said, sitting down across from me, I always hoped you would find someone eventually. I even tried to set you up with a few people over the years because I thought it would be good for you to have a girlfriend. She had been actively hoping I would find romantic love elsewhere while keeping me available for all the practical support and emotional labor she needed. I always imagined that when you got married, your wife and I would become good friends, and you could be like the brother figure to both of us. I thought it would be perfect. Perfect for her, maybe, but devastating for me to realize that she had never seen me as a potential romantic partner and had actually been planning a future where I remained in her life as a permanent friend-zone fixture while she built her real romantic life with someone else. The week following our bakery conversation, I maintained my boundaries even more strictly, which triggered what I can only describe as an emotional manipulation campaign involving every person in Olivia's orbit. It started with her grandmother calling me on a Tuesday evening, her voice shaky and concerned in a way that immediately made me feel guilty. Lucas, dear, I'm worried about Olivia, she said. She came to visit Sunday and she was just beside herself, crying and saying you don't want to be her friend anymore. She's always been so sensitive, and I think she's taking this very hard. Her grandmother had always been sweet to me, treating me like actual family, which made this conversation particularly painful. She says you won't help with the bakery anymore and that she's falling behind on everything, the elderly woman continued. I know it's not my place, but you two have been like family for so long. Whatever happened between you, surely it can be worked out. I explained gently that Olivia and I were working through some differences about our friendship boundaries, but her grandmother kept pressing. She's been having panic attacks again, Lucas. Just like when her parents got divorced. I haven't seen her this upset in years. The guilt trip was expertly crafted, painting me as the villain who was abandoning a fragile woman during her time of need. Thursday evening brought a dinner invitation from Olivia's parents, who had always treated me warmly and included me in family celebrations. We'd love to have you over this weekend, her mother said when she called. We haven't seen you in a while and we miss having you around. I should have known it was a setup, but I genuinely cared about her parents and thought maybe they just wanted to catch up. The dinner turned into an intervention disguised as casual conversation. Olivia mentioned you two have been having some difficulties, her father said over dessert. She seems to think you're pulling away from the friendship. Her mother chimed in with carefully rehearsed talking points about how much I meant to their family and how Olivia had always been there for me during difficult times. Remember when you were laid off from your previous job 3 years ago? Olivia was so worried about you, always checking in and making sure you were eating properly. I did remember being laid off, and I remembered Olivia expressing concern, but I also remembered being the one who found my new job through my own networking while she offered emotional support that mainly consisted of telling me everything would work out fine. And when your father had his heart attack last year, Olivia was the first person to offer help, her mother continued. She even closed the bakery early to drive you to the hospital. These examples felt hollow because they described basic human decency rather than the kind of substantial support I had been providing her for years, but her parents presented them as evidence of deep reciprocal care. The manipulation escalated when Olivia herself launched a full court press that included showing up at my workplace. I was finishing lunch at my desk when she appeared in our office lobby with a box of assorted pastries from the bakery, looking appropriately contrite and vulnerable. I brought these for you and your coworkers, she said when I met her in the reception area. I wanted to apologize for how I handled our conversation last week. My colleagues were delighted by the free pastries and made comments about how thoughtful my girlfriend was, which Olivia didn't correct. I've been thinking about everything you said, she continued in a voice loud enough for my coworkers to overhear. You're absolutely right that friendships should be more balanced, and I want to work on that. She suggested we meet for coffee that evening to discuss how she could be a better friend, making it sound like she was genuinely committed to change. When I hesitated, she added, I miss you, Lucas. I miss us. I know I've been selfish, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this. The public nature of her apology put me in an impossible position. Refusing her request for coffee would make me look unreasonable to my coworkers who had just witnessed what appeared to be a heartfelt reconciliation attempt. That evening's coffee meeting revealed the true nature of her desperation when she made an offer that shocked me. I've been thinking about what you said about wanting more from our relationship, she began, stirring her latte nervously. Maybe we could try dating. I mean really dating. See how it goes. The suggestion felt more like a business negotiation than a romantic declaration. I know I said I never thought of you that way, but maybe I just never let myself consider it because I was scared of ruining our friendship, she continued. But if that's what it takes to keep you in my life, I'm willing to try. Her willingness to fake romantic interest just to maintain access to my support services was perhaps the most insulting thing she could have offered, reducing both of our feelings to a transaction where she would pretend to love me in exchange for continued free labor. 3 weeks after our coffee shop conversation, I knew I needed to have one final discussion with Olivia to clarify exactly what our relationship had meant to each of us, but I had no idea how much more devastating the truth could get. I suggested we meet at the lake house, the place where we'd spent countless weekends together and where I'd invested so much time and money in renovations, thinking we were building something permanent together. She arrived looking hopeful, probably thinking this was my way of signaling that I was ready to return to our previous arrangement or maybe even accept her offer to try dating. We sat on the deck overlooking the water, and I asked her the question that had been haunting me since our first real conversation weeks earlier. Olivia, I need to understand something. In all these years, did you ever actually want a romantic relationship with me? She was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the lake before finally answering with brutal honesty. No, Lucas. I never felt that way about you. I tried to imagine it sometimes, especially when people would ask us if we were dating, but I just couldn't see you that way. The confirmation hurt, but what came next was far worse. I always hoped you would find someone else eventually, she continued. Someone you could have a real romantic relationship with while still being my best friend. I asked her what she had expected would happen to our dynamic once I found this hypothetical romantic partner, and her answer revealed just how delusional her expectations had been. I thought we could all be friends, she said earnestly. I imagined your future wife would understand how close we are and maybe she'd become like a sister to me too. We could all hang out together, maybe even take vacations as a group. She had genuinely believed that any woman I might marry would be perfectly comfortable with me maintaining our current level of involvement in her life, including managing her business finances and spending every weekend helping with house projects. I even thought about asking you to be the best man at my wedding someday, she admitted, and those words hit me like a physical blow. I've always pictured you standing up there next to me when I marry the right person, because you're the most important man in my life, just not in a romantic way. The image of me standing at the altar watching her marry someone else while having spent 7 years functioning as her unpaid life manager was so absurd and painful that I almost laughed. But the worst revelation was still coming. Lucas, I have to be honest with you about something else, she said, her voice getting smaller. I've been encouraging other women to ask you out over the years because I really thought it would be good for you to find love. I asked her to explain what she meant by that, though I was already dreading the answer. Well, like Sarah from the farmer's market, she's asked me about you several times and I've told her you were single and looking for someone nice, she said. And my friend Jessica from yoga class, she mentioned she thought you were cute, so I gave her your number. She had been actively trying to set me up with other women while keeping me as her personal support system, genuinely believing this was helpful rather than manipulative. I thought if you had a girlfriend, you'd be happier, and then I wouldn't feel guilty about asking you for help with things, she continued. I know I rely on you a lot, and I thought if you had your own romantic relationship, then our friendship would feel more balanced. The twisted logic of her thinking was staggering, She had convinced herself that getting me into a relationship with someone else would somehow make it more acceptable for her to continue using me as her unpaid life manager. But none of those women ever worked out, she said with what seemed like genuine confusion. Sarah said you seemed distracted when she tried to flirt with you, and Jessica said you were nice but didn't seem interested in dating. I couldn't understand why you weren't pursuing any of them. I explained that I hadn't been available to date other women because I thought I was already in a committed relationship with her, which prompted the most painful admission of all. Oh, she said, looking genuinely surprised. I never realized you thought we were together like that. I just thought you were really dedicated to our friendship and maybe weren't ready for romance yet. Her ability to completely misread 7 years of devoted behavior as platonic friendship dedication rather than romantic love was either incredibly naive or willfully ignorant, and I was no longer sure which possibility was worse. After that final conversation at the lake house, I made the hardest decision of my adult life and sent Olivia a message explaining that I could no longer continue our one-sided dynamic and needed to go no contact for my own emotional health. I blocked her number, unfriended her on all social media, and asked our mutual friends not to share information about either of us with the other person. I thought that would be the end of it, but I severely underestimated how desperate she would become when she realized I was serious about cutting ties completely. Within a week, my phone was buzzing with calls from numbers I didn't recognize, and when I answered one of them, it was Olivia using her coworker's phone. "Lucas, please don't hang up," she said quickly. "I just need 5 minutes to explain how I'm going to fix this." I hung up immediately and blocked that number too, but she kept finding new phones to call from her bakery's business line, her parents' house phone, even customers' phones when they came into the bakery. The escalation became genuinely concerning when she started creating fake social media accounts to monitor my activity and send me messages. She would use photos of random women with names like Jennifer or Amanda, and try to strike up conversations about mutual friends or comment on my posts with observations that made it clear she was still tracking my daily life. I caught her when she made a mistake and referenced something only she would know about my work schedule, revealing that Amanda was actually her trying to maintain contact. But the stalking behavior went beyond online harassment. I started noticing her car parked outside my apartment building at odd hours, and she began showing up at places she knew I frequented. My gym reported that a woman matching her description had asked the front desk staff about my workout schedule, claiming to be an old friend who wanted to surprise me. The coffee shop where I worked on weekends told me that someone had been asking customers if they knew me and whether they'd seen me around lately. My neighbor Mrs. Chen mentioned that she'd caught a woman trying to leave something at my door at 2 in the morning, and when confronted, the woman claimed to be my cousin dropping off a family emergency message. I knew it was Olivia because Mrs. Chen described her perfectly, and the next morning I found a handwritten letter that had been slipped under my door. The letter was 6 pages of desperate rambling about how our friendship was worth fighting for and how she was willing to make any changes necessary to get me back in her life. "I know I took you for granted," she wrote. "I know I should have appreciated how much you did for me, but I thought we had all the time in the world to figure things out. I never realized you were in love with me, but now that I know, maybe we can work with that. I'm willing to try being your girlfriend if that's what you really want." The letter revealed that she still viewed the situation as a misunderstanding that could be fixed with the right combination of persistence and minimal compromise on her part. She wasn't apologizing for 7 years of emotional manipulation. She was offering to throw me a bone by pretending to be romantically interested if it meant keeping her support system intact. The situation became so intrusive that I started documenting everything and seriously considered filing for a restraining order. She had contacted my elderly parents claiming to be worried about my mental health and asking if they thought I needed professional help. She told them I had been acting strangely and pulling away from people who cared about me, painting herself as a concerned friend rather than the person whose behavior had driven me to cut contact. My mother called me confused and worried, asking if everything was okay and whether I had been having problems with depression or anxiety. "Olivia seems so concerned about you," she said. "She mentioned that you've been isolating yourself and refusing help from friends. Are you sure you're taking care of yourself?" Having to explain to my parents that my friend was actually stalking me after I discovered our 7-year relationship was completely one-sided was humiliating and exhausting. The final straw came when I arrived home from work to find her sitting in the lobby of my apartment building, having somehow convinced the security guard that she was my cousin waiting to surprise me for my birthday, which wasn't for another 4 months. "I can't take this anymore," she said when she saw me, tears streaming down her face. "I miss you so much and I don't understand why you're being so cruel. All I want is for us to go back to being friends." I told her clearly that if she continued to contact me or show up at my home or workplace, I would file a restraining order and involve the police, but even that threat didn't seem to register as she continued talking about how we could work things out if I would just give her another chance. 6 months after implementing no contact with Olivia, I made the decision to relocate to Miami for a fresh start, accepting a senior analyst position with a financial firm that offered both better pay and the distance I needed to rebuild my life. The move felt like emerging from an emotional fog that had clouded my judgment for 7 years, and for the first time since college, I was living entirely for myself rather than organizing my life around someone else's needs and schedule. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in codependent relationships, and through our sessions, I began to understand how I had enabled Olivia's behavior by consistently accepting crumbs of affection while providing full meals of support and devotion. My therapist helped me recognize the patterns that had led me to mistake being useful for being loved, and I learned to identify the red flags I had ignored for so long because I was afraid of confronting the truth about our dynamic. For the first time in years, I began dating with healthy boundaries and clear expectations, eventually meeting Elena, a marine biologist who showed genuine reciprocal interest in building something together rather than just accepting what I could provide for her. Through mutual friends back home, I occasionally heard updates about Olivia's situation, and the news confirmed what I had suspected would happen once she lost her primary support system. Her bakery was struggling financially without my accounting help, and she had gone through 2 hired bookkeepers who quit after she expected them to work for below-market rates while handling personal tasks that fell outside their job descriptions. The lake house had to be sold because she couldn't afford the maintenance and repairs that I had been handling for years, and she moved into a small apartment closer to town where she was forced to manage her own utilities, car maintenance, and household responsibilities for the first time since college. According to our mutual friend Mike, she had tried to replace me with a series of male friends who initially seemed willing to help but quickly distanced themselves when they realized the extent of her expectations and her inability to reciprocate meaningful support. "She keeps saying she doesn't understand why people won't just be there for her like you were," Mike told me during a phone call. I tried to explain that friendship doesn't work that way, but she seems genuinely confused about why everyone has limits when you never did. The most significant change came when several of her closest female friends confronted her about her stalking behavior after learning the full story of how she had treated me and why I had disappeared so completely from her life. Apparently, her friend Rachel called her out during a group dinner, telling her that contacting my parents and showing up at my apartment was inappropriate and frightening rather than romantic or devoted. "She lost a lot of friends when they realized how she had been treating you," Mike explained. People started looking back at their own interactions with her and recognizing similar patterns of one-sided support expectations. Eventually, Olivia sought therapy herself after her stalking behavior cost her several important friendships, and she began to understand that her actions were driving people away rather than bringing them closer. According to Mike, she was slowly beginning to grasp how her treatment of relationships as transactions rather than mutual partnerships had damaged every meaningful connection in her life. The irony wasn't lost on me that it took losing everyone else for her to finally examine her own behavior patterns and consider how her actions affected other people. A year after moving to Miami, I was thriving in ways I hadn't experienced since before I met Olivia, with a career trajectory that reflected my actual abilities rather than being held back by time and energy drains, a romantic relationship built on mutual respect and shared responsibilities, and friendships where I felt valued for who I was rather than what I could provide. Elena and I had moved in together and were talking seriously about marriage, but this time I knew with certainty that my partner saw me as an essential part of her life rather than a convenient service provider she hoped to keep around permanently. When Mike mentioned that Olivia had asked about me recently and wondered if I might be open to a conversation about closure and apologies, I realized that I felt only distant sympathy for the person she had become and complete contentment with the life I had built without her. The 7 years I had invested in what I thought was love had taught me exactly what I deserved in a real relationship, and I was finally receiving it.